in order to really get personalized medicine in oncology to be a reality, there's a lot of education that needs to be educating physicians, nurses, pharmacists, patients. Are the two organizations working together or individually to achieve that? How are you supporting education of the important people that are involved in the treatment of patients with multiple myeloma?
So you're absolutely right. I think that the most important element is making sure that the patients are educated. I think one of the hardest parts about personalized medicine is, as a patient, you need to understand your genomics. But sometimes in myeloma, knowing your genomics puts you at high risk, and it can be, challenging news to hear. So just, an anecdote from myself as a myeloma patient, I was a translocation of 414, high risk, and that was really hard for me to know. But high risk can sometimes be a good thing, because later on, I was very lucky, I was on Velcade, but later on, retrospectively, we look at the data and we realize patients with that translocation do very well on proteasome inhibitors. And now you want to make sure all of the patients and the community know this kind of information. But it's hard, because now a patient is hearing, maybe they're high risk, but they may not know the whole story. So I think, we've had many conversations about, you always had the patient at the middle. We all did that 10 years ago, the patient's at the middle. But I really believe the patient's at the middle now, because you're looking at the patient and saying, it's your tissue, it's your data, it's your doctor, it's your life. You have to be educated on this and know that even if you're high risk today, it may not mean you're high risk tomorrow. So just know what has to happen in terms of new clinical trials. And that comes back to working with the community oncologists who are seeing 70% of these patients and making sure they're educated on what are we seeing genomically, what are we going to tell our patients about that. So we're constantly partnering with Millennium in terms of investing in consumer and patient-based programs as well as CME programs for our doctors. And I think as we move Compass out and we see all these new findings, we'll end up working together to say, what are we learning that they have to know about today that's really important for them in terms of their clinical care?
I think one of the most concerning things is to encounter a patient who just listens to their doctor. Because doctors are coming up the learning curve too, and it's so important for patients to engage in finding out about their disease, because nobody can advocate for them like they can. Their doctors certainly do. That is the role of every physician. But the patient really is the person who, as Kathy says, whose life is at stake. So getting accessible information to patients is so critical, and that's why we partner with organizations like the Multiple Myeloma Research Foundation, because it enables us to get data to very learned third parties who can get it to patients in a way that's distanced from the company, so the patient can trust that the source is not biased, but they can still get access to the information. And to me, that's so critical, because the patients are the people who are going to sign up to have the biopsies, for instance, and to release their tissue to the tissue bank. And the fact that they understand that this is not only important for them, but important for the understanding of the entire scope of the disease is so critical. And the faster we can build those databases with patients' consent, the faster we get to outcomes. What we've seen is that even with data that's absolutely clear and incontrovertible with the KRAS mutations and EGFR inhibitors in colorectal cancer, that's a relatively simple message, but it still takes time for physicians to hear it, understand it, and act upon it across the spectrum. Academic centers act very quickly. Community doctors are faced with a much broader variety in everything they're seeing, so it's harder to accumulate all that new knowledge in every field. And that's where I think pharmaceutical sales reps can be a huge component of the education, bringing that education to doctors. The partnership which we engage in around major medical meetings, small community physician meetings, throughout the year at different venues helps get that message out. And then of course there are peer-reviewed journals and publications. So there are a number of different forums to get that information out, but what's most important is having a really crystal clear message. When you see this, this is what it means, and here's what you do about it. And I think we're not there yet
No,
in multiple myeloma. You know, the 414, that we really can start to say something about, but we're still making progress on the other biomarkers.
So we're not there yet in terms of the data, or we're not there yet in terms of the educational initiatives?
We're not, and we're not
both.
As Deborah said, there's not something they can specifically act on right now. But it doesn't mean that you don't need to be learning in terms of what we're seeing, and especially when you start to segment myeloma, they need to start understanding what might be high risk, medium risk, low risk. And how do we start to handle those things? But they are, they're managing many, many types of cancer, and they're inundated. So you have to keep it as simple as possible.
You have to really think about the explosion of knowledge in the biology of cancer. Not only are you learning about cancer as over 100 different diseases, when you think about lung and colon and multiple myeloma, but then when you start dividing each of those up according to these genetic drivers, it's an exponential function. And so, oncologists today are having to internalize and take in so much more data faster than ever before. So we really have a responsibility to keep that information flowing, make it clear and understandable and actionable.
It's nice to have been, a third party that's been collecting the names of all of the patients and the community oncologists since we started in 1998, because it does make it easier for us as new findings come out that we have everybody in our database, and we can literally put together simple materials, do CME programs, and educate people very, very quickly. And I think, making sure those databases are as strong as they can be is incredible. One of the things that helps us sometimes is we're doing expanded access programs. We're really starting to understand now which community oncologists are seeing the bulk of patients, which community centers might be able to do good tissue banking, be involved in phase 2 clinical trials. So we need to start keeping those data systems together too, so that we can reach out to them right away and get to the centers that are seeing the highest volume of patients.
Yeah, so the overall objective for all of us is to find out more about the disease, get effective therapies to patients faster. And patient participation is so critical. We've got to have the community oncologists on board, and then we've got to have a place to collect the data, which is what Compass allows us to do.